But this is one thing I wanted to talk to you about. And so for my viewers, I have Les Weiss, the author of this book
Yeah, that's
that
right.
I think most of my viewers are familiar with this book. Maybe
Yeah.
not with you that much, but one thing I'm gonna let you introduce yourself more, but I wanted to, since we're on the topic, this future of teaching, because you've been teaching for a long time. And I am kind of, I don't know, it's both pros and cons with this new kind of teaching situation post COVID and with like we're teaching online more. I didn't like it when I had to teach online,
Yeah.
and but I see the potential, and I think this is what the future. I'm not as good as with you with this. I need to get into the kind of getting the lighting and the and that
Yeah.
stuff going, and the audio is difficult too. So how do you
Yeah.
see? Is it positive or negative, or how do you look at the whole thing with teaching online and stuff like that?
Well, the thing is, well, first thing, teaching 13,000 students and 11,000 at GIT in 10 years. Yeah,
Wow, yeah.
it's a different experience where I was doing 80 people in a class at
Mm,
GIT. Like, say it's 1984. I'm
mm.
teaching 80 people. And then 2 hours later, I'm teaching 80 people. And so by 4 in the afternoon, I taught, 320 people or whatever.
Yeah,
So it's different in that way. But it does allow one thing. It allows access, which is really good. And
yeah.
the other thing too is allows you to have a lot of information that you can give them or send them. So example, somebody would look and they go, oh, less wise or whatever. And the people that knew or GIT or all the years or the books that I did and more books and it went on and on, right? But they go, why doesn't he have like 10,000 videos on YouTube and it goes on and on, right? And the reason is because at some point I decided not to do that for a while. But what happened, I have hundreds of lessons of curriculum that I can instantly access in a few seconds through a server, through a deal. I
Right.
also have programs I've been using, one I'm going to recommend to you too, in relation to your question with the students, that allows me, it's not so much that the cameras do picture in picture, but it allows me to bring up curriculum and have other curriculum or play a
Yeah.
video inside of this or another video. So I spent a lot of time creating stuff. So for students, it allows me a couple of things. If they ask for something, I can I can go do it. And usually right after the lesson, I'll either teach them a lesson at the moment, like you said, for the students, so that helps them with some kind of step-by-step plan. Or later on, I might go, okay, that might be a good lesson to have, so I can bring up a lesson for them or record it or videotape it in the moment, like in a
Yeah.
second, right? So that's one thing. And then the other thing, um, let me get back to this. So then that's good for the student because I can help them with that. Then secondly, I can do follow-ups with them, opposed to where I'm in person with them, right? And also if a student asks for something, so if you've been teaching, which you have for years, right? So the first thing is I had a music studio in New Orleans, and a friend of mine, Hank Mackey, and I taught a bunch of people, including a guitar player from New Orleans, Steve Mezikowski, and his girlfriend was Emily Rimler. So we go way back,
Mm.
and all the guitar players would come to New Orleans, Lenny Breau and all of them. And so we're doing that. Then Ron Eshday from
Mhm.
GIT, right? So Ron and I grew up together playing on Bourbon Street. And so we were teaching. Then when GIT started, I had already moved to LA, even though
Right.
Ronnie did about 10 years before. And so he goes, you want to teach at GIT? So back when Howard Alden,
Howard
everybody,
Roberts.
Paul Gilbert, yeah, well, Howard Roberts, yeah, I knew Howard Roberts anyway before he started the school way back when.
Ah,
But in any case, so when I got there, it was like in this going out of this first year or second year. So most of the people that ever been there, I taught at one time. But before that, this music studio, I taught a lot of people. So what I'm saying is this: over time, when somebody says, well, what style do you play? Well, when you've been playing for decades, and in New Orleans, I started playing like on Bourbon Street in clubs when I was like 15 years old.
mhm.
And so it isn't blues or rock. I live those styles. I didn't have to go, oh, here's a book and I learned how to, oh, here's double stops and should I pre-bend and where am I going to use the leverage? So I lived all those styles. So what I'm saying over time, it allows me to, when I teach people, which I coach a lot of people. I coach, and I say coaching because a lot of my students are professional musicians or play semi-professional or
Hmm.
whatever. And so when I teach them, there'll be certain things they're looking for. And so what I'm saying is, getting back to your experience of teaching online. So a couple of things allowed me to do. One, early days of GIT, I started to realize with students that came like you and all the others, and when I taught, it's Steve. I'm saying Steve Trovato, but Paul Gilbert and Frank Gambale and all of them, right?
Oh,
All of those had their own contributions to stuff. So over the years, I realized in the early '80s that I couldn't teach how I learned how to play alone. So I had to have one, two, three. So I have five or six, seven different ways of seeing things. So, so what I'm saying is the way I've been able to enhance the experience when we connect like this is I'm
mhm.
able to give them things at the moment that they need, not so much from the not so much just from a book or some other thing.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I spent a lot of time uh, learning multiple ways to teach. So you could imagine, like, say, Mick Goodridge, right? So there's Mick in the books and incredible stuff forever because
Uh-huh.
he spent his whole life from the time when Abercrombie and them were living in a hotel room, and he could hear Mick practicing all the time and riding his bike up and down the street in
Uh-huh.
Boston. It goes on, learning like 10 million variations of, and move this note here and do
Yeah,
this.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so along with doing all of that, the last 10 or 15 years, I spent time really perfecting the delivery method for the students. So you have all this information. So I don't need to go, here is shock and awe, here's like 10 million things you practice. I,
Yeah.
I, here's one thing that will shift your playing. And so what I'm saying is, so getting back to your point though, in order to teach this online experience and to be really effective with it, I have really succinct things that somebody can go, oh, Les just taught me this, in that one little piece of information, they can carry it and then be, of course, be motivated to keep doing it because they see results in a short amount of
Hmm.
time. So what I'm saying, one of my philosophies for that is to learn ways. So being online, a couple of things happen. One, a student asks for something, so I'm able to really quickly, if I wasn't connected to it, right, to look online and see not so much a solution for the, if because I've been like almost like an Olympic coach for like 40 years, so
Hmm.
I've already sent people to the Olympics. And what my main job is there something I don't understand, and not so much theoretically, but maybe there's a concept or what kind of music or whatever they're doing. So in any case, what I'm saying is you're able to enhance the experience this way. And how I see in you too, after all these years of teaching, you get to where, like, if somebody plays a record for me, right? It doesn't make any difference, jazz, blues, funk, no matter what. I can hear its influences from, somebody to say, here's the record here of this incredible combination, funk and jazz, or whatever. And I go, okay, first thing in this was from 1973. This rock band introduced this. So I'm able to kind of see like a chef, basically. You reach
Right.
in and they can taste, pepper and these
Yeah,
spices and so
yeah.
on. So, but my point is this, it allows you to do it really quickly. It allows me that if a student asks something or they're playing something, that I can go access from either my library or something else or create something on the spot for it. So I'm able to record not just through Zoom, but I have programs that I can either record the screenshots, the deal, I can move from window to
Right.
window, I can show, so what I'm saying is I'm able to do, so what I'm saying is I perfected the teaching part helped a lot because as they asked me things and at the same time through the technology. So
Yeah, so
like if
that
I
I like the
like
idea of being a coach because one of the main things that come up, I do like Patreon sessions with my patrons and everything, and the one thing that comes up the most is this: my followers or my students, they think that they get overwhelmed with all the information that is online, and they don't know how to kind of sort through the information and I can see that because you can access everything in an instant these days, right? So having a coach guide you and or direct you to the information that you need or hopefully that you need, that's a really good way to look at it, I think.
and I have tools that I can share with you over time, over these weeks. I have tools and stuff to learn how to redefine that, not just the music part of it, but also redefine that part to make it simpler for. I mean, I'll go back in the days of being overwhelmed, right? So Ted Greene and I were good friends or whatever, even though
Oh
I never
wow.
studied with him because I was at GIT in the 70s and he came to visit. But in any case, we'd talk mostly politics or whatever. But he had done, the chord chemistry book, which is incredible, and then he did the modern chord progressions. So the first thing I told him is that the publisher, when I think Dale Zdenek did the second book, the chord book, I said the first thing would have been that they took a stamp, those rubber stamps, and
Yeah,
they
yeah.
put encyclopedia or reference book, right?
Mhm.
Which finally Tim Lurch did, right? Because Tim was my student, and then of course he studied with.
Okay.
So when he did the other thing, everything is categorized and everything is uh, uh, so everything is categorized. So now when you approach a dictionary or but if we use the modern terms, I go, okay, let's look at this database of jazz guitar chords. No guy's going, okay, here's what I'm going to do is let me set the timer and in 2 hours I've memorized the database. No, you go
No.
in and you find the one. And so in any case, so that's the first thing is you change it. So I tell the students, all those things are good in one way,
Yeah.
which are good. There's information everywhere, but also it's confusing because people are first teaching a way they believe works, and it probably worked for them, but it might not work for the
Yeah.
student. And secondly, is we don't have we don't have the background. We don't have the background on the student or their talent,
Yeah.
and so this is another thing. So but here's an argument that you hear. Okay, so here's the one, because here you're the school musician, you play great, you do something, it's incredible. So here's the first thing that we used to hear. First, when we were really young, when you were playing, they go, "Oh, I see you play guitar, huh? Where do you live?" "Oh, I live in Sweden, but I was when you moved, you live in another country." Go, "Do you play rock? Do you play lead or rhythm?" What lead or rhythm, so that was the first thing. Then secondly, I get this one from older musicians because I live in LA where there's guys that really play, right? A
Uh-huh.
bunch of guys and other guys in different styles, and they go, I can't read like you guys can. I play by ear. I go, look, first thing is professional musicians also can hear and they don't hear and they go, and then they'll do this. The ones that are a little defensive about, well, like a guy that has a PhD, from university in
Yeah.
particle physics, and the other guy is a welder in the shipyard, right?
Uh-huh.
So he gets a little defensive when he's teaching at a university, boast to the other guy. And I said, look, the first thing is there's one thing that I've observed over the years is you see a guy that starts guitar and he plays by ear, okay?
Hmm.
And over years he's playing, and you see the kid, we've seen them all, the 16-year-old that played through the real book, other than the even more intense version with the gypsies, right? They
Uh-huh.
sit there and go, okay, you're going to play guitar from the time you're 3. You're going
Yeah.
to jam at least 6 hours a day, 6 days a week with your uncles and shit. They're
Yeah.
burning. You're going to learn downstroke, upstroke. And of course, by the time you're 15, you're burning, right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing is, so I said, yeah, so these guys by ear. And then you go, oh, here's a guy that reads music
Uh-huh.
and went to university, maybe not so much today because it's more modern, right? Went to university and he can't play half as well as them. And I
Yeah.
said, that's totally true. But I said, now here's another thing. So let's go to New Orleans, where I'm from, right?
Hmm.
Okay. So here's a guy that copies records, listens to music, also learned how to read,
Yeah.
studied theory, went to school. So what happens is this, the guy that plays by ear in 5 years or whatever, he's playing really good, right?
Uh,
The guy that knows theory,
yeah. Yeah.
plays by ear, and did this, he's here.
I totally agree with that. Yeah.
And so and then the other thing too, if I hear a melody or I hear, it doesn't make any difference if you study long enough, right? I can just write it down or I hear the progressions in my head. So what we can do is pre-hear. So I remember when I was doing sessions in LA and stuff, and the horn players and all, really great studio players. And New Orleans has a lot of great horn players, not
Yeah.
just Wynton Marsalis and all of them and Branford, it goes on, but I'm talking because of the Dixieland music. So
Hmm.
in answer to this question about the some of the concepts, right? So one of the things is that those guys read, but what they're able to do is how they make the music real. The one, and Howard and I have had this discussion before, but where you read ahead 1 or 2 measures, right?
Hmm.
So the first thing is that if you study peripheral vision, I can see the entire page and the two horn players next to me. But
Hmm.
somehow I'm going to look a measure ahead, which is my consciousness. But the horn players said that when they're reading and they're reading a part they've never played before, even though have they really never played it because the shapes are the
Right.
same,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But they said what happens is we hear it in our head
Yeah.
two or three thousandths of a second, but we might hear three measures in our head. And so what happens is we get to the music, we're not remembering the notes that are played. We're
Yeah.
playing it from memory, like hearing a lick
Yeah.
off a record. And so it makes it so much real. And so what they're doing is pre-hearing.
Yeah, the
They're hearing
trumpet player kind of needs to do that, right? Because they need to hear the notes they're playing.
right.
We can just put our finger and produce the sound, but a trumpet player or a trombone player, they need to kind of, like a vocalist, they need to imagine the notes they're gonna play, or the line, or the what's on the page.
Yeah, and like you said, your point with the trumpet player, the embouchure, right? They're
Yeah.
playing, and there's no like the saxophone player is learning all the fingerings, and here's the octave key and clarinet, and
Uh-huh.
it goes on. But yeah, no, they're more connected. So what happens? You have to be able to do that. So for me, years ago, there's a book uh, called First Steps to Ear Training, and it was written by a horn player at Berkeley years ago, like in the 50s. And
Okay.
I'll send you a thing.
Yeah,
And it was
I love that kind of stuff.
yeah, and basically what it was an ear training book that you listen to the scale degrees. And so
Uh-huh.
basically it starts by the fifth, sixth, seventh, and eighth of the key want to go up. And the closer they get to the top, the stronger it gets. And the four, three, two, one wants to go down. So in any case, I got this little book and I would sit in my car, and it wasn't to hear exotic intervals, it was just to hear the tendency of
Right.
a seven or a third or a sixth, but it connected to notes. So after a while, when I was younger, I could look at a thing and I'm hearing the melody in my head, like you would read a book to yourself, right?
Mhm.
So what I'm saying is, first, from the natural standpoint, there's because I don't want to digress from the main thing was is that if a player that there's ear training that can help improve your ability that you pre-hear something, and then when you pre-hear it, hence Chet Baker, because I
Yeah.
know when Philip Catherine, with my other friend from Luxembourg, that said when Philip goes, who had played with all those cats, and he goes, I played with Chet Baker, and I was like humbled to death because the guy goes, oh, let's just play now, and it's the intuitive
And
connected.
that's what I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm saying though is there is techniques that can help people to learn. So what I'm saying, two parts. One, there's certain. What I'm saying is there. I tell my students there's certain myths and stuff on the internet and all that, and the reading versus not reading and playing by ear. So a lot of times when you collect techniques for things, you can clear up that stuff and keep the student focused. Because in the end, when we wrote the book, The Deliberate Musician, right? So that Deliberate Musician book was meant because I would have musicians that would get so good, and then would be afraid to move forward with their practicing or get insecure about something. And so it was this fear of doing stuff. So I spent time with that book trying to help musicians people that have been playing overcome their fears. So we see this in sports. So if I'm a football player on the pitch, right? And I have trouble, I'm an attacker, and I come down and somehow the ball goes over the net, and I get self-conscious about it. I go, oh man, how am I going to play? So any case, so part of the coaching part is to help people over that hump or let them move forward because everybody has some ceiling where they get
Yeah.
uh, they get nervous with the stuff. So what I'm saying though is two parts: something simple, little things that make it simple, and then number two, the other thing is to get the student to move and actually practice something. Now, the YouTube and all of those things present a problem. They show you what's possible, but it's so overwhelming,
Yeah.
that so back to your original point, not to digress any farther, but yeah, it's just
Yeah, but
it's
back in the day, if I was confused by something, let's say when I went to GI, because I went to GIT, if I
yeah,
didn't get the altered scale, let's say I didn't get it,
yeah,
I would go to a teacher like, can you show me how does this work with the altered scale or whatever? But now you can just enter into YouTube, like altered scale, and you would get like probably hundreds of videos
Yeah.
of maybe 40% of those videos are good,
Yeah.
10% of those videos are really good, and a lot of them are not even correct.
Yeah. They're not correct at all. And look, GIT is another thing. So if I'm at GIT, right, what happens? If I'm at GIT as a student and I'm having trouble with the scale and I go, oh, wait, let me go ask the teacher. Oh, he left already. Then till 3 in the morning, I have tons of students and I go, did you learn that? And then there's one guy goes, oh yeah, I knew that before I came. And then he shows you the secret way. Yeah, of course. It's that knowledge that's combined together, you know. Yeah, it's and here's the thing, a lot of times the YouTube videos for the average person, right? They watch that stuff and they go, God, the guy's incredible. I'll never do it. And they get afraid that they'll never do it. At GIT, two things happen. One, with 20x students in your, not even your class, maybe the other class over, the guy in the back of the room you never talk to, and he's from I don't know, he's from the Bahamas. And you go, yeah, I'm from a colder country. It must be warm there, you know, whatever. And so you're talking to him, and you two are the same level. Maybe you're a little better than him. So you play, and of course you feel good because you go, shit, I'm better than him, but that's cool. And then what happens, you go on with your classes, and then halfway through the school, you go, oh, I haven't seen you. We haven't talked for a while. Then you play, and you got better. And he's here now. And you go, oh my God, he's better than me. So now the competitive goes, well, shoot, he did it. And I was better than him. I'm better, but he's even better than me. And so then that forces you the power. Come on, let's do it.
Yeah.
And then, and so it's that competitive nature. Not everybody goes through that, but that competitive nature forces you to go, we're in trouble here, you know, because look, we had student teachers, right? And they were really good. They went to the school and they were really good. And of course, some of the more exceptional ones like Frank Gambale and them, but the other students are really good students. But then students that come into the school and they're the guy that went to GIT and they play good, you know, and then they get a student that just got there and he's better. So then Pat Hicks calls me, Les, look, I need you to create this small advanced class because these guys are ready to play in Manchester United or Sweden or someplace on the team. And so, so it's that. So the YouTubes don't give you that. You're either strong enough to go, you know.
I mean, for someone like me, I can tell immediately if the video is good or bad. And I know if this is something that, like Tim Lurch videos, I watch 2 seconds, so it's like, oh, what is this? This is good stuff, right? I can tell that it's quality information and that he's a great player. Even though I had never heard of him before, I discovered him on YouTube. But for somebody who doesn't know really how that much, it's going to be difficult to decipher or to decide what's quality or not. So that's where the coach can come in. And when you're in the university, I find that I have a college degree too, and I
know you do. So you got the whole,
the teachers become like your gurus. Like Scott Henderson was my guru, and he can kind of help you to sort through like the process of learning. And but if you're just at home looking at YouTube videos, you don't get that dynamic. So, and you hear a lot of these days. I see a lot of people on YouTube and social media saying like these jazz schools they're useless these days. Don't go to Berkeley. It's expensive, which it is.
Yeah, it is very expensive.
But so that's one thing, that the cost of tuition is ridiculous. But I'm a firm believer in higher education, and
you should have that. That's important. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What do you think? Like, is this what you're doing a threat to the?
No, because number one, I was adjunct to the university in New Orleans, Loyola University before, and there. So no, it doesn't threaten at all. And in fact, actually, I'm not threatened at all because all my friends, Bruce Foreman and Steve Tavato and all of them that teach at USC.
Yeah. So GIT is part of UCLA now?
No, this is just they teach because Steve Tavato, even though he was at GIT, has been an adjunct professor at USC for 20 years. First thing, it's $30,000 every 4 months to go there. So that's 60,000 times 4. That's $250,000. So that's number one. But students that go there want to get their master's degree after the other because they want to teach at university.
Uh-huh.
So that's a good part. So no, there's no threat for that anymore because America started changing. They changed those jazz programs where they still have to follow some of the classical stuff, but over the years, they changed that stuff so that that students that have the money, they can do the higher education and do the other stuff and still come out and be good players. But there's a lot of stuff they have to do to, they end up still with a lot of student debt and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So, but it's none of what I'm doing is a threat to them because they're all my friends and I teach there. I'll teach up in Berkeley and all these schools. So it's not, and those are good programs and they serve two purposes. One, it's good to develop critical thinking, right?
Hmm.
Number two, you can play jazz. And number three, it gives you 4 more years before your parents force you to work in the family business. See, that's what it's all
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
So it's good for everybody, you know, because you're pushing them back and going, I want to be a musician.
yeah,
Really? Yeah, I'd say,
yeah.
but you know, the strange part is where I'm from, New Orleans,
Uh-huh.
it's a very unique thing. So if you went, this would be any place in America. I'm not sure in Europe, even though I lived in Vienna for 6 years, right? But if you went to your parents and went, look, I'm going to be a chef, and they go, right, you're going to be, you know, one of those quick cooks and making
Uh-huh.
sandwiches and stuff like that. But in New Orleans, when you say that, because they have so many famous chefs, they go, well, okay, that's cool. Because they have all these programs, even not the university programs, but even in New Orleans, they have programs when you're in high school, you're like 16 years old, you're in that school before you go to university.
Right.
And they have a program, you know, they'd have this program where you'd be half a day you go to school, and the next day you become a welder, auto mechanic, you know, whatever. And then about 35 years ago, or you become a chef. So you study in chef school. When you graduate from high school, you go to Paris for 1 year. You come back. Then
Uh-huh.
when you the same people in New Orleans, because my sister is was an opera singer in the choir, in the symphony choir of the New Orleans Symphony, right? So when you say you want to be a musician, they go, oh, okay, fine. Because people make a living there, you see, and so they
Yeah.
don't. But in any other place, you're going to university for what? And when are you going to wake up and take finance on the side?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
It's the same over here.
is it really? Yeah, 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 yeah.
People wouldn't encourage anybody to go to music, get a degree in music. That's considered a little bit insane. But people do it. It's different here because if you go to music college in Sweden, it's only a handful of people in that program. But in the States, there's like hundreds of students at Berkeley or whatever.
Yeah,
So
now Berkeley's different because they are that school factory, you know. Yeah,
yeah,
and there's so many students there. I mean, all my friends from Emily and all them in the day, and Mike Stern, everybody I know that ever went there and then left after 2 years or stayed there to study with Mick Goodridge or somebody.
uh-huh.
Yeah, it's a and look, I have students that go there. I had a student about 3 years ago that was going there, and half of the people, even half of the teachers, and I know because like Cheryl Bailey and friends of mine, right?
Uh-huh.
They teach there, they
Yeah,
didn't even know who they were because the school is so big. They
yeah,
didn't even know
yeah,
what's happening. And this would never happen when we grew up, you know.
yeah, yeah. That's what
Yeah,
I've heard too. People go to a new school or something and expect to be studying with some famous jazz musician that they don't even see them,
yeah,
and then their own private instructor is like, "Who are you again?" It's like, oh,
yeah,
and
exactly.
they pay so much money for that too. So it
Yeah,
is a
yeah.
little bit ridiculous, but at the same time, I would hate to see those institutions disappear because I think they're important. I think Berkeley College and Manhattan School of Music and all that stuff is it's important that that continues. Otherwise, where it's jazz would kind of fade away.
Oh yeah, and we have schools all over that are like that. No, it's incredible. And all the schools in New York and the other schools we have here. No, no, it's incredible. And in other places in Kansas City and Chicago and
And
all over.
Texas, right? North Texas is supposed to be really good.
That's the second week people mentioned that. Yeah, North Texas, Denton. Yeah, and when I had the music school in New Orleans with Hank Mackey, we had the music school, and Hank taught a student, and he's the one that's the head of the guitar department for North Texas State. Yeah, But North Texas State was known for something else. 35 years ago, they had the big bands, so
Yeah.
people experience. And so every player, some of the greatest horn players, other than living in New York and other places, went to North Texas, and their job was to make it to 1 o'clock in the afternoon,
Yeah.
the 1 o'clock lab band. And so when Buddy Rich and these bands in the day, Buddy would come through, and if he had, because the crazy stories, he had fired 3 horn players, he'd pull up to the school and they would hire guys that could really play. Oh yeah, it was like it's the horn player, it generates horn players like crazy. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. North Texas, man. And Jack Peterson was a guitar player there for years.
Oh,
And
I don't know. I don't know him.
he was the guy, just like uh, William Levitt. So he wrote all the Berkeley
Okay.
books, right? So Jack Peterson, maybe around the same time, he was the same guy at North Texas State. He was a
Okay.
guitar teacher, and guitar players would go all the time. They would go visit, especially if they were from the South. They would go to North Texas. Oh yeah, North Texas. But the horn players, man, those guys got some crazy. But back to your point, though, yeah, those schools help for one reason. You need an environment where
Yeah.
you can play and jam and do stuff all day long. And if you don't have that, and that's where you're always exchanging and playing stuff and doing.
Exactly. And studying, some people say like, no, don't go to Berkeley. Take the money and go to New York and find a private instructor or
Yeah.
but you don't get that experience of being around all those
Yeah,
teachers.
if you can
And
already play, yeah, it's one thing. But if you can't play, or you need to grow first, you need years, and Berkeley's a
yeah,
better place.
yeah,
Right, so, yeah, and look, the thing too, if you have the money, um, yeah, because well, all of them, but Kurt Rosenwinkel and all those other guys and
yeah,
people and all the New York guys I know, when they live there and you're in that environment or whatever, and you play, but you've got to be able to play some because the competition, it's not so much you have to be really, you have to really humble yourself and walk in. Because
yeah,
guys can really play. Same thing in LA. They go, well,
yeah,
LA's so spread out. You show up, okay, where is it? And they don't hear anybody, and they go, but the guys are here. And not only if you look at like here's guitar night with our guys and the people and Anthony Wilson, it goes on and on, right? But there's other guys that can play too, but they show up. But it's all, yeah, you need all that because you need the camaraderie of playing with people. And if you don't, and that's the part that you build over time. But in the beginning, the world is separated, so you have to artificially create some of that. And I think that's where where the problem is with the other. Because the other thing too, students, to give you an example, here's one to the thing of going or playing or whatever. So obviously, all these guitar players, Pat Martini and I were friends for years, and it goes on and on, right? But that technique, the Pat Martino worked on meticulously. But what happened was all those organ players, when you play with them, and anybody that's ever played with one, Joey DeFranco just died, right? But way before him, and not just Jimmy Smith, but all those guys and Trudy Pitt, and it goes on. They count off a tempo, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're going, and you're playing a gig like 5 nights a week in a club, and the guy's playing Hammond B3. And the hardest part about playing with the Hammond B3 player is when the guy comes to the gig, you hope the gig is at least for 2 months because you have to help him carry the Leslie tone cabinets in and the 2 handles on the end of the thing. But the tempos are so quick. And so after a while, and then what happens, here's where the ego gets him, right? They're playing, they're burning. Okay, you're up next. And you're like struggling or whatever, and it goes on, all right? And then you have the thing where after everybody's solo, they applaud, right? So horn player is playing, and then he finishes playing, the crowd like this, and then you're playing. So after a while, you go, I got to change that. So you start, it's like surviving, right, in a pact. And so eventually you do that. And the same thing with the tempos. You keep pushing. And so a lot of that happens over time. And then usually by the 3rd set, this from playing all the time. By the time, if we're playing 4 hours, by halfway into the 3rd set, everything is working perfectly.
it's some things you need to learn on the bandstand. You can't learn it in the practice room. You have to experience it on the stage, I think. But you played with Jack McDuff. Did you play with?
No, I didn't play with Jack McDuff. I played with other organ players in New Orleans. But what I'm saying, my friends that did play with them, are all the organ players had the same thing. They could play like them and play all those styles. And I had tons of B3 organ players in New Orleans and all over, and that were burning and had all those styles down and playing all the stuff and rhythm changes at a 300 metronome marking and crazy stuff. Yeah, that's just the experience of playing thousands of gigs.
Yeah,
before.
I think of like early George Benson stuff when he was really young. There's some footage of him playing. I think it's with Jack McDuff, and he's just
because he got that gig or whatever. And when he went to New York, and he had heard Pat Martino play in a club, and then he got scared for a minute.
Yeah.
Like, all
I've
of
heard
that.
that story. Yeah.
Yeah, but he's since I'm from a generation before that, there's organ players all the time, and but the German organ player, Emily played with her, but I discovered her about 10 years ago, Barbara Dennerlein.
Oh, I never heard of it.
You have to find her.
Oh, cool.
So
Yeah.
imagine this: a woman sits there, and she's very attractive. She sits down at the organ like this, okay? And now she's burning. I mean, like burning, not only the organ player, but perfect time. And she's just burning down the organ. So, and you go, okay, it's like Joey or somebody, the left hand doing down, doing down, doing down, down. She's doing it with her feet. Doing
Right.
down, down, down. Better than any woman, female organ player, or any organ player on earth. She's one of the greatest one with her feet. And you're like, oh my God, really? Just incredible players.
What's their name again?
Barber, like Barbara.
Uh-huh.
Barbara Dennerlein. Yeah, she's but what I'm saying is there's players what I'm saying though, getting back to your thing, yeah, there's players everywhere. And when you play for decades, like Ronnie and I, Eshte and others, we played on Bourbon Street for years in clubs, jazz, Dixieland, all these different styles, right? And so we played with thousands of musicians for thousands of hours, even before I got to LA, then lived there for years playing. And so by the time I got to GIT, where I taught there, I was in my late 20s, I think. Yeah, 1978. So when I got there and did the first workshops, and I'd already played for years and years and played tons of gigs and all that. And so by then we can impart the knowledge of the an interesting thing, Ronnie and I, one day, Joe DiOrio, years ago, before he played with this comedy act. He had a gig and he was playing at a club in New Orleans because we had this famous Dixieland trumpet player. And Ronnie, I went, oh, I heard that Joe DiOrio guy's playing it. So we went and we watched him play because he had done that one record with Sonny Stitt in 1963, Move On Over.
Okay.
And so they're burning on the record. But here's one thing which sad he died, but we were friends for decades, right? But so what happened though, Joe said, the thing is, Les, and one day he was like really serious, and I'm talking, this is like maybe 1979, 80. We're sitting at GIT he's waiting for a student or something. And he goes, Les, the sad part between Sonny Stitt and myself and the keyboard player and whoever was in the thing, right? We couldn't spell the triad between the three of us. So it just, kind of makes you wonder. I mean, I have so many stories because I grew up with all those musicians, and it's,
Joe DiOrio was still teaching at GIT when I was there, and Ron Eshete, is that how you say his name?
Eshte, like ashtray. Yeah,
he was also teaching there, I remember, when I
Yeah,
was.
because I left, like you said, because I left to start a school in Europe, in Vienna. We started the American Institute of Music, and so when I went there and started a school, then I left.
That school is not still around. Is it still
It ended a long time ago.
Okay.
It ended a long time ago. Maybe lasted about 6 or 7 years, and I brought everybody over, Mike Stern and Jim Hall and all of them. And
I think I remember hearing about that. Yeah.
We started that school or whatever, and maybe through the whole school we had maybe graduated maybe 500 students.
But then Wolfgang isn't Wolfgang Muthspiel from?
Yeah, see, but Wolfgang wasn't in there at the time.
He was in New York then.
He was in New York, and he wasn't there at all. But they had their other legend, Karl Rotzer.
No.
So Karl Rotzer is a gypsy jazz monster guitar player from Austria, way before Karl Rotzer.
Okay.
And he could burn, and he kind of played like kind of well, he played Benson and Bebop, but he also played funk, but he had trouble with the drug thing over time. But yeah, Carl Rotzer. Oh no,
I
I got a ton of guys that are hiding in the thing. No, burning Carl Rotzer, yeah.
I should know who that is, but I must admit that I.
He's the legend there. He was the legend, and once in a while we'd have uh, we had a guy that's a rock star in Hungary, Andre Csillag.
Okay.
And so it happened. Andre was living in Vorarlberg near the Swiss border, right, in Vienna, across the other side. And then we used to teach workshops there because one of my partners in the school, in the American Institute of Music, was from Bregenz on the opposite side. Vienna's on the
Okay.
other side. And so then he taught in our school for a while, and he had Pat Martino chops, but he was like a rock player. So what happens after the wall came down, everything, the school we left years later, he sends me a text, Les, I'm back on stage, and now he's like in a Hungary on these stages with like 30,000 people playing, and he was. But yeah, there's all those guys that are the monster. Yeah, there's a bunch of monsters that are playing along, but in case what I'm saying with the school and other things, yeah, it's just um, there's yeah we but the thing you're lucky for two things. One, for me, I'm lucky because I'm from New Orleans, right? So we'd had all that. So I knew tons of musicians way before we ever before I ever went to LA. Then Ronnie went to LA. Then musicians from New Orleans came to LA for a while, and then of course I was ground zero for all that stuff through the '70s and all this stuff, and then Larry Carlton and all of them, and and when but not to get too far off on that, but in any case, so all those musicians were there, and Steve
But
Lithicka.
is it still like that in New Orleans that you can play clubs, live music every day?
Yeah, yeah. Well, there's a lot of live music in New Orleans. Yeah, yeah, there definitely is. It may not be quite exactly when I was there, but it is a lot of music because they have all those festivals that come and Mardi
Yeah.
Gras for 2 months, and then they have all these. There's a lot of gigs there, and it's a small. And you can play. One day you can play. Uh, uh, yeah, one day, I mean, I remember even when I left, which were decades ago, it was sometimes we play 9 gigs in a week.
Yeah.
You had to play two in a day, but we always had a joke in New Orleans because even though you can play jazz and all the styles and stuff, right, and funk, and there's a whole bunch of styles of music, and all those parties and people come for conventions. It's a place people visit.
Yeah.
We
I've
always had
never
a
been.
joke. We had a joke about the cars. Whose Porsche is that? Oh, that's the banjo players, because if you play banjo, you could. And I remember 2 months, I think it was 2 months before I was going to California. I go, look, I'm moving to California and I'm going to leave. And the guy goes, Les, look, I need you to play banjo on a couple of gigs. And so I go, oh, I got a friend, he'll lend it to me. And I tuned it like a guitar, right?
Mhm.
So in case I started playing banjo, but in 2 months I had so many gigs that the day before I flew out, I had like 3 gigs on banjo. It's just, yeah, it's funny. It's yeah.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
never been to New Orleans. I would love to
Yeah,
go.
but Steve Mezikowski and them, those are monsters, man. It's a monster player. Play and bass players and horn players and stuff. Yeah, they definitely are.
It's where
They're,
it's all coming from. Like it's isn't it like the birthplace of jazz, I would
well,
say?
the birthplace of jazz in the Dixieland, but there's guys that can just really play. And so over time, and the other thing too, I had a teacher. His name was Breau, Dr. Breau. And what happened was he was kind of gifted when he was younger, and I studied arranging and composing from him, big band stuff. But everybody in New Orleans, all the horn players had studied with him how to write music. And so what happened was when he was about 24 or 5, he wrote some arrangements for Carmen McRae or whatever. But as years went on, he became a really great teacher. And we have a school for gifted musicians, okay? And it's called NOCCA. And so this NOCCA school, he taught Wynton Marsalis,
Of
he taught
course. Yeah.
Branford, he taught Terrence Blanchard, he taught
Oh,
all of them. But here's the other part. Now to date myself back, so I used to play with Ellis Marsalis, right?
is
Wynton's
that the
father.
dad?
Yeah, that's the dad. So we
Yeah.
used to play with him all the time, and Bert had actually helped him the writer, they were good friends and piano players, and so I played with Ellis on gigs for years. And I remember once I'd finished the gig at this hotel, and we came out and we're talking. There's Ellis. Hey, Ellis, what's going on? You know, typical New Orleans, 1 or 2 in the morning. He goes, yeah. My sons have been playing with me, and Branford and Winton have been playing or whatever, and they're like 16, you know. And they're sounding really good. You should come and hear them. They're going to play a little gig with me. And they're like 15 or 16. I go, oh, really? Okay. Well, I got no time for that. So never hear anything. I moved to California eventually. And then I'm watching the Chicago Jazz Festival with Herbie Hancock. And so Herbie Hancock goes, I want to introduce you to Wynton Marsalis. And he was 21 then. And so he's playing. Oh my God! I should have went to hear these guys play. So yeah, it's there's guys that can play. I mean, really.
There's a whole bunch of them. There are even more brothers, right? Like there's a whole.
Yeah, there's more brothers, and it goes on and on. Because here's other brothers, Neville brothers. We have all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
No, they have tons of that.
The Meters was.
Yeah, the Meters, absolutely. And guess who? Dr. John.
Oh yeah, of course.
Of course, yeah, and that kind of music, dun 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 dun, that kind of shuffle. Oh no, we have all of that stuff, and yeah, no, they have the guys that can play. But the interesting thing, the Steve Mazikowski, they formed a band with this horn bass player and this drummer named Johnny Vidakovich, and Johnny Vidakovich is like, he was probably like Dave Weckl-ish, you know Dave.
Yeah, of course.
But 15 years before Dave Weckl even played drums.
Right.
Goodness, guys. And I remember Howard Roberts, way before he had a school, he came to do a workshop before he'd even thought about doing a school or whatever. And so he comes there, and we go to a club, and Johnny Vidakovich is playing at the Playboy Club, and he's in high school. It's like incredible. And Howard Roberts heard him and go, God's one of the most incredible drummers I ever heard. He reminds me of John Guerin, the one that Howard Roberts, you know, the studio guy in LA. Yeah. He's a studio drummer, but really great. But in any case, so yeah, so they have those guys that are like geniuses with this stuff. And yeah, it's a crazy, yeah, it's just life, you know, it's the part of stuff that's, yeah, there's so many guitar stories. Yeah, I don't want to, I'll say focus more on the other stuff you want to do now, but I got tons of that stuff.
Well, I'm sure, yeah.
You know, it's but it's fun. It's all part of the music scene and the, you know, yeah, I mean, so.
Because the option, when I think of America, somebody who wants to go to America to make it as a jazz musician would go to New York.
Yeah.
And then if you want to make it as a musician, working musician, it's LA.
Well, it could be LA, or you could go across the country, but you're right. Yeah, you could be. The jazz thing has always been go to New York. And yeah, because if you can survive in that environment, right, and you stay there long enough, yeah, it was a hub for yeah, it's a hub for musicians and people to play. But what happened in the day when New York, you go, this is the place, but it wasn't the only place. It was also Chicago.
Right.
And that's why Joe DiOrio is from Chicago.
Kansas too, right? Kansas.
Well, Kansas City too. Kansas City.
Yeah, Kansas City.
Yeah, that was a great city, and also Louisville, and of course they'd play in New Orleans, and also in but they were the place, but Chicago was too, and Chicago and Detroit, Kenny Burrell, all those guys, right? Oh. And all the horn players, and then all the Kings, Albert King, all of them, they're all the Chicago guys. Yeah, so it's Chicago, and it still is an incredible place for musicians, you know. So it's like, but here's the scary part. Now, here's the problem. Two things. One, once we would travel on the road. We had this trio, and we'd travel on the road all over. And usually to get jobs, I mean, you could play in New Orleans, but to get jobs, you would travel the winter in the north. So you'd go to Indianapolis, not only Indianapolis, but Indiana. You'd go to Chicago and shit. It's minus 20 degrees, and you're playing in these clubs, right? So one day we're playing in this club, and you'd play late at night because Chicago is a real like union town for union workers. Mm-hmm. So musicians, Every other musician would play like 6 nights a week. But Chicago was the only city in America with the musicians union, you only could play 5. Okay.
Okay.
And so it happened, and we're playing this gig, which would last from like 10 to 2, 4 in the morning, right? So we're playing whatever, but at 3 there was a jam session. So I remember one night we're playing and doing stuff, and we're young or whatever, and and the agent had booked us, and we're doing our thing for weeks, and a guy shows up. Can I sit in on drums? They go, oh yeah, fine. It's 3 in the morning. Do it. So he plays on the drum. And so he burns our drummer down, like completely destroyed him, you know. And then he goes, I go, God, man, you play really good. It's incredible. Then he goes, can I play bass? He burns the bass player
Oh,
down.
shit.
So before you know it, he'd blown everybody away, you know. And so, yeah, there was that crazy stuff. And the other place was crazy. Being from Louisiana, we'd go work in Texas.
Okay.
And so you got that Texas thing is just like Tennessee. You know, you see in the movies, you know, the ones, the pool sharks where they play pool and you
Oh,
go in and they, you know, you've seen those movies
yeah,
like
yeah.
with, yeah. And so they have those pool shark guitar players and they come in, oh, I'm just a player, I play a little fiddle and shit like that. And they're like, you know, or in Nashville, we'd always have the guys that would have no one you ever heard of, and he's Hank Garland too, you know, the
Right.
next
Yeah,
level.
yeah. I
He
can
goes,
imagine.
yeah, it's funny with this stuff. Like then going to finger picking. So he's like Joe Bonamassa instantly switches to it just crazy guitar. And so what happened was in Texas you couldn't have alcohol in clubs. So they had these clubs that people brought in their own alcohol, and you'd have these big dance bands that are they're country dance bands, right?
Hmm.
But they always had the guy. We'd be like in a music store the next day. Oh yeah, I saw you. It was really nice. The guy picks up the fiddle, and you know, he's Isaac Perlman, and then the next minute he's, and yeah, it was the crazy gunslinger stuff. You know, it was yeah, I'd say so what I'm saying is, yes, New York is the place to be for the jazz scene or
Yeah.
whatever. But also jazz, you know, is a there's the playing part, so it would be good you could immerse yourself in that, you know. But at the same time, uh, um, depending on what kind of music you play, there's other cities you could go to, right, to play. And anything, a real jazz musician, it's really, you know this because of the, is that, I know, I mean, you play classical guitar, you play all this stuff, but it's like a way of life. It's more than a style. You know, it isn't like
Yeah.
I play. Isn't like I'm in the studios and go, okay, I need some Chuck Berry, you know,
Yeah.
and I need this and I need that, or Larry Carlton, just micro bends, nothing, not minor third bends, whatever it is. And so, but true jazz musicians are jazz musicians usually.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
That's New York. Like the Kurt Rosenwinkels they have a very specific. I mean, I'm sure he can play a lot of other styles, but he doesn't do that. He plays Kurt Rosenwinkel. He's an artist,
yeah.
and that kind of
Play.
stuff I find in is New York.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: you've heard the story of Motown, right?
Of course.
And then you know the one of Muscle Shoals, Alabama.
No, yeah, the no.
The one where so half those singers and those stars were created in Muscle Shoals, Alabama, not in,
Okay.
and including Aretha Franklin. They had incredible musicians. You have to watch the special, and I think the special is called "Find the Thing on Muscle Shoals" is a
Okay.
city,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
you have to watch that because in here they had guys. So imagine this: you're in the middle of Germany, and you stop, and there's a farmer, and he pulls up in his thing. Here you go, Chris Scott. So he says hello. You're hanging out with the farmer, and he's got those bib, you know, the overalls that are pulled up with the shirt, and he's like, you know, 200 kilos, right? So Muscle Shoals, they had a guy that did that, and when those musicians first came to Muscle Shoals, they go, "What's he doing anyway here? What's his cracker?" Because they were then it was the black thing. I'm the drummer. You're a drummer? And a half hour later, they were going, oh my God, like monster musicians. So here's what I want to tell you. Just like Greg Allman, all of them Southern rock and roll,
Uh-huh.
Muscle Shoals, Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. right? So you're in Florida, not Miami Beach with all the hip stuff and jewelry. So what happens, guys will retire, okay? New York, Chicago, someplace, and they go, I'm gonna go live in Florida. And I have my shorts on and the little flip-flops
Yeah.
and they have jazz gigs. You go, oh, great, we're playing on Sunday, a jazz gig. And then a few guys show up or a guy shows up, can I sit in? And then all of a sudden, it it's some monster musician. They have no name at all. It's just they're monsters. You don't want to go to Mississippi, Alabama, and you go, shit, New York, I'm ready. Are you really ready? When the guy shows up and you go, yeah, he's just got a little shirt on, maybe no shirt, with the sleeves. And then they're burning the guitar down is because these guys are players. And just like if you went to Nashville and, some of the guys that no one ever heard of. So my point is with that, there's a bunch of guys hanging out all over the country that no one's ever heard of.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Play. You would get you would be
Same thing with Canada. There's so many musicians in Canada
yeah, it's funny. I was thinking that. Yeah,
that nobody is heard of because it's hard for them to compete with the American, like Ed Bickert. I mean, people have heard of Ed Bickert, but he's not as famous as he should be, I think. Or
Well, so take it with Ed, right? So he came to GIT, but way before that, years before, maybe 79, I think, maybe, I forgot. But I'm with Ted Greene, or maybe he's even before he even mentioned him in his book, but he goes, Les, have you ever heard of Ed Bickert? I go, no. It's like 1979. Really? Huh, who is that guy anyway? So I looked into it, and then that was one of the reasons I switched to a Telecaster all those years at GIT.
oh wow, oh cool.
But so Ed Bickert, though, came one time, he came to GIT one time.
Oh, I didn't even know he was there.
Well, he didn't came to teach, but he came there one time, and
Okay.
Jody Oriole comes up to him and he goes, Ed Bickert's here. Really? Okay, cool. Let's go see him. So they play in the performance room, and so they go to play or something, and I go, Joe, I said, it took you a lot of time in between the songs you're going to play, right? He said, because I would do this, I'd go, he would go to Ed Bickert and go, what do you want to play? And Ed Bickert for like 30 seconds. And then he would go, if I knew what to play, I would be leading a band, some crazy stuff. And then they played like this incredible shit and he left. And so, yeah, Ed Bickert, man. Yeah, I know of yeah, it's an unbelievable player beyond but you know what happened? The reason I knew, I mean, I'd heard of him for another reason is that when I was in California, a couple of years later, I played with the horn players, a trumpet player in LA, and we had a band that would play like a big band, small big band, and play guitar. And it was great. And he loved Rob McConnell and the Boss Brass.
I've
had all the arrangements of that.
I've met him.
Oh, you met him?
I've met Reb just before he died. Yeah, he was.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
He was a kind of a, how should I put it? He's a difficult personality. He was coming to the school I was in Toronto, and yeah. No, go on.
That's right. No, because I forgot. No, so you're right. Because you live there. You were. I mean, you live there. Yeah, for sure. So all those.
Sorry, your screen has frozen here.
Yeah, no, it's just I'm moving the camera over.
Okay.
So, but in any case, yeah, he lived there. I mean, you lived there, so you know all those guys.
Yeah, but he died. He died just after that. He was very old when I met him. But yeah.
And what about Lorne Olofsky too?
Yeah, I've met Lorne. I don't know him, but I've seen him play many times.
Yeah, you have, yeah, and I first got some records of him because I know he was playing with Ed, and yeah, he's a great player.
Oh, he's ridiculous.
He's really good, and but there's a guy I wanted to ask you. Let me see where he is. Wanted to ask you about this guy. But in any case, yeah. So Canada has incredible players. No, that's like not a, and bass players. I mean, not only what's his name, but and then they have that. Who's that? Funk bass player I just came across. I got to find this.
Rich Brown?
Yeah, maybe Rich Brown or one of those. Yeah, that's really. In fact, maybe you even recommended him once on one of your videos. I think he plays really good.
Yeah.
But this wasn't a. Let me see if I can find this guy. But he's. But in any case, yeah. Ed Bickert never.
So the spirit of what's his name? He was Canadian. The Lenny Breau. So
yeah, Lenny Breau.
Everything is kind of in his spirit. The whole thing of Ed Bickert, they kind of, I don't know if it was inspired by him, but I feel like it's kind of connected.
Yeah,
The,
he did, and also because Lenny would come all the time from
but he lived in the States, I guess. But he was from Canada, I guess.
yeah, but he lived in the States for a long time, and he would come through to New Orleans. In fact, I'll show you something here. Yeah, he lived in New Orleans. I mean, not New Orleans. He would come through and all the time, way before he became famous, and because John Knowles and all of them, they were totally into him, and we would hear him all the time, where uh, uh, he would come to New Orleans and just want to jam and stuff. No, he was a super nice guy. And then he came to California and taught at GIT, and then he went through the other stuff with the bass player and all. It was I don't want to go into all that tragedy, but yeah, that turned out to be
Oh, he
that's
taught at GI. Did Lenny
taught at
Bruce?
GIT. Yeah, he did. He actually taught
Oh,
there. He
I
was,
did not. Oh, interesting.
and before, but he had already was dead before you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he was dead before the thing, but that definitely, he definitely, I don't know, I'll have to find it. But in any case, yeah, here we go. I'll show you this. So, and then he would come he came to California. This is way before you came, but he came to California, and and he, and then one time we had I mean, many times, back in the day when NAMM, which is like the Frankfurt show, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
NAMM
no, I know.
had uh, I'll show you here. Uh, we had what is it? Uh, Got to find it for you, but it was right here. We had let me see here. I'll show you this. But he used to come all the time. But my point, though, with this is that I want to show you this picture. But hold on. Oh yeah, I got it. Here we go. Yeah. So yeah. So in any case, here's so we had a NAMM show, but NAMM shows used to be smaller. The Frankfurt show was the biggest. So here's Lenny and I playing, and I had a
Oh,
Les
wow.
Paul that's being worked on. We were playing jazz, and then he's playing together. And so yeah, so we had that was, and we were at the booth where you see here Bill Lawrence pickups on the right. You see the thing right there,
But
and
what is that guitar he's playing?
and that was some custom guitar he had built or whatever. He always
Okay.
had going on. Yeah, but Lenny and all that we were playing in the day. That was the kind of crazy part
The finger pick, yeah.
the finger
Ed
pick.
Bickert was also finger. I
Yeah,
mean,
he
thumb. What do you call it? Like a thumb pick? Is that what it's called?
a thumb pick. Yeah, for
Yeah, and
sure. Yeah.
also Lauren Lofsky does that. That's
Yeah, and
unusual
Lauren
in.
Lotke has that big one on there too. He does have the big one that's with this thing. Yeah, and he sounds, yeah, they're incredible players. You know, I have an album uh, Lorna, I mean, with Ed Bickert and Bill Mays. I don't know if you know Bill Mays.
No.
So Bill Mays is a piano player that lives in San Diego, south of
Okay.
California, you know, down in San Diego. And so Bill Mays is a really incredible jazz piano player, okay? And he also has styles where he plays like Bill Evans. And so there's a record with Ed Bickert and him playing where Ed Bickert's doing the lines and then he's playing Bill Mays, yeah. But you know, I have for you, so let me see if you have this one now. Uh, I have a recording, you can't even buy it anymore. I have these MP3s. Uh, it's Jim Hall's wife.
What?
So Jim Hall's wife is a singer.
Okay.
And so what happened was she wanted to record some stuff. So she asked Jim Hall if he could get a guitar player because maybe, you know,
Yeah.
if you're together, it didn't work out. And so I have a recording. It wasn't done as a record. I think Jim Hall originally released it, and then and not so much as a record, but you could download it someplace. But I have all the MP3s, and you should hear this because even years later, when Ed Bickert talked, because she would go, we didn't hear it because it's recorded like on a cassette machine, right? But she would go, let's play a tune, right? Whatever that is, My Funny Valentine or whatever. And
Uh-huh.
then Ed Bickert would just go, oh yeah, and then he just starts playing the
Yeah.
most incredible. But I have it. You're going to love that when you listen
Oh
to it
wow.
because
Yeah.
there's so much. Uh, and Ed Bickert's really good with singers, because he
I don't
did that.
think I've ever heard him play with vocalists. I've heard him. I've only heard his stuff with Paul Desmond and some of his live recordings from Toronto and
Yeah, yeah, the live recordings of this stuff. Yeah, yeah, and of course that's what made him famous when he did the Pure Desmond
Pure
album.
Desmond. Yeah.
I have that album transcribed, the whole thing, everything he
Yeah.
played.
It's fantastic. I keep coming back to that album.
Yeah, yeah. And years ago, I did what did years later, but I categorized all his chords and the voicings and neck diagrams. I'll have to send you some of the stuff. Yeah, I got the because I with the Telecaster for years, I loved all that stuff to playing in the. But I'm telling you,
I've never had a Telecaster, but I'm thinking more and more about getting one. I
yeah.
want to
Well,
get
the
one of
good
those
thing,
like half acoustic with a F hole.
yeah.
I had a student who had one of those and it sounded amazing. He had like the best sound.
Well,
I,
the thing is, when Ted had mentioned about that thing in the Telecaster, and
oh yeah,
so
Ted
then I
Greene.
didn't have a Telecaster. So in like '84, I went, I had other guitars if I did studio or whatever you're doing. Right? So I go to Frank Cavalli. I go, Frank, I would need to buy a Telecaster. Do you have any? Yeah, I got one. I'll sell you. So he sold me a '73, and that's the one I played for years. And so yeah,
I can't
yeah.
picture Frank Gambale with a Telecaster. It just doesn't.
Telecaster. And then Frank Cavalli suggested another thing. He goes, Les, I think maybe you should put EMGs on it. So the first ones, I put 3 EMGs. So in California, we have a guy that's one of the most famous guitar repairmen on earth. Every
Yeah.
student, everybody. And so I went to him and I go, put 3 EMGs where I had 3 switches. So you put the 3 switches, it sounded incredible because people don't realize that number one,
No
it's
humming.
not just active, well, no humming, but the 3 pickups are still single coil, so it had a great sound. So it sounded incredible. I played it for years. So then, but here's another story. So then, we're about 2 years later or three. I'm teaching this big performance class that we have where the students play and you do whatever. And so Pat Hicks comes to me, the president goes, look, Robin, who we knew and he'd been coming back and forth to school, we all knew each other. Robin needs something to do or whatever. Could he like maybe be an assistant in the class and help people? And I went, okay, so it's great. So he goes, God, I really love the sound of your Telecaster. So about a month into it, he goes, let me try your Telecaster. He goes, God, sounds incredible. But then being Robin, he goes, but it had 3 little toggle switches I could reach to turn the pickups. He goes, I hate those controls there. And so yeah, so it's just all the silliness of guitar. But yeah, Telecaster is great. The main thing is when you play it, and then you take your hand off of it, you can sip your coffee and the note's still ringing. And that's the part that's the beauty of the.
I think Tim Lurch has a video on how to set up a Telecaster in the way that kind of Ted Greene did to get that kind of
Yeah,
sound.
because the thing with him is he had studied with Ted Greene. He wanted to do it. And so then over the last years later, when he finally started playing a Telecaster and do all that, yeah, Tim did a great job with all that stuff and the thing. And also the fact that Ted Greene for a while, years ago, during the modern guitar book, the one with all the chords, not the chord chemistry
Uh,
book, which was
I've
earlier.
actually never studied with those books, but I have to get those books, but it's just
Yeah,
never.
yeah, 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 for sure. And but what happened was Ted Greene had guitar strings, and he had a set of guitar strings, Ted Greene Deep Telly, and what they were is just
Really?
heavier strings so that you could tune a minor third down, which you see a lot
Oh,
of the time for Tim, where he sounds so incredible, but he tunes a minor third down, and
oh, really?
that's why you get that super deep sound with the stuff. And no, he does an incredible job in the touch and the other thing with Ted Greene too. Ted Greene was all about learn the melody and put some chords around it.
Yeah.
It wasn't like the modern guys that play the melody note and then become a Stravinsky by writing all these moving harmonies around it and play like some guitar players do, which are incredible, that you just learn the melody and so that's why also Tim, which I love, that he has that like elegant touch style, is
Yeah.
that he has all those chords, but he's just moving through the chords, and the melody is clear and there, and it's not like the part which all the other incredible guitar players do, do the 10,000 chords in between and all the other stuff. Yeah, it's incredible touch. Yeah, it's a
I need to wrap this up, but I want to ask you about one more LA guy. I'm guessing you knew this guy, Jimmy Wyble.
yeah, yeah,
Did you know him?
yeah. I did. Yeah, absolutely. He taught at the school too, and then when I left for Europe for the school, yeah,
Because that's the most underrated guitar player in my estimation. Like I find his stuff amazing, but I discovered him recently, like a few years ago, and yeah, it's just very uh, different approach
yeah.
and very
Well,
difficult to play. I'm trying to learn one of his
thing. First,
etudes.
the guy's one of the nicest guys on earth, period, ever, right? I mean, he's gone now, but so in
Yeah.
any case, it was several of his disciples. I mean, really his disciples. Okay,
Uh-huh.
so one thing for sure is that Howard Alden studied with him. Okay,
Okay.
also a guitar player. There was a classical guitar player that taught at GIT, and then that's where you'll see
Yeah,
reference
yeah,
to
yeah.
David Oakes. Yeah.
He was my instructor in
Right.
reading.
So
Yeah.
David or whatever, they loved him to death and they kept that alive. Then Beth Marlis, who is a student too, that
Yeah.
was then at the GIT for years. So you see where they keep his name alive. And then Sid Jacobs, the guitar player,
Of
where Sid,
course, yeah.
yeah. And the other thing too, the guitar that he has, that round hole guitar that Sid Jacobs is playing,
Uh-huh.
Jimmy gave it to him. So Jimmy was like the
Oh.
most gifted guy, but he would teach classes there. Maybe I don't know, it must have been before or whatever, but he taught classes at GIT, and everybody loved him because he had all those moving lines and all the stuff, and a unique way of playing. And then they have the different methods for playing. Yeah, he's an incredible. Yeah, Jimmy Wyble, man, that's really. And the older guys, like Howard Roberts and all them, they went to George Van Epps.
Ah, yeah.
And even Howard Alden went to George Van Epps when he was really young. When
Okay.
Howard Alden was a student at the school, and he played in a pizza parlor. Howard
Yeah.
Alden was really young, like 16 or 17, with his sister, and so that's why he learned all these standards on banjo. For I think it was on banjo first, but in any case, he studied with him. Uh, and so they learned harmony, and then other friends of mine like Wolf Marshall, which that's
Yeah, yeah.
talking a week and a half ago or two, and also he studied with George Van Epps. What happened, Howard Alden, because we even talk about it sometimes, but Howard Alden, those like three gigantic methods by
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, Howard Alden, I think, went through all those and mastered all that stuff, all those movements, and so yeah, yeah, I mean,
Fascinating.
yeah, for sure is. But anybody, well, first thing we have to do this again because obviously
Yeah.
there's so many stories to share with a fellow musician other than just it was hardly an interview. It was more like we're talking about I'm filling in the gaps of all the stuff that
Yeah, no, it's interesting to hear. There was so many things that I was not aware of at all, and uh, yeah, I appreciate it.
yeah. So just for a quick thing with switching gears back to you for a second. So now you went to JIT, you did all that. You were in Canada, you
Ah,
studied there, you did all this stuff and whatever, and then you play really great. You have all this stuff in depth, looks at everything. I mean, it's uh,
thanks.
so what is the what's your approach? What's your thing? You play classical guitar first. I mean,
Yeah, I started with classical guitar, and then I didn't play it for years. Then I had to go back to get my teaching credentials. So then I took classical guitar as my major, and so I came back to classical guitar in my 40s.
oh,
And
there you go.
I enjoy playing now. If I practice classical. I enjoy practicing classical guitar more than. But I'm also a Django Reinhardt enthusiast, right? So that's what I. If I do gigs, it's mostly Django Reinhardt stuff because that's what people know me for. Because I can do that stuff, Not
With
everybody
all,
can do that, so.
yeah, all those arpeggios and
Yeah,
harmonic.
I'm not as good as the real masters of that style, but I can play that stuff. So, but yeah, that's my strength. Is also a problem that I do too many things. Uh, but I'm a teacher mostly. I teach at like a pre-college, and
And and so you're teaching and doing all of that, and then when you do the videos and the other stuff, when you have time, because you have a lot of them, you know.
yeah, I have to keep myself busy with the videos, and it's a good way to kind of keep myself motivated to always work on something.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like yeah, I also learning this whole new thing of teaching online. I don't do too much of that, but getting the technology to work, like the sound and the video and everything, I find it really interesting to learn. But where can people find if they want to find? I know you have more books, but I don't know if they're in print. This book, I'm sure, is in print still, right?
Yeah, those are all in print, and also, and then the other jazz guitar ones in print, and the Deliberate Musicians actually on uh,
But you were
you can
mentioning a
order
book
copies.
about like that was you were that you co-wrote with somebody about like the kind of what was that?